So, welcome to Inside Pharma Leadership. I'm Keith Willis, and I am your host. And I am joined today by Darshan Kulkarni. Darshan is not only a lawyer, but he is also a PharmD. And we're going to have a good conversation today. So, when most pharma leaders think of compliance as a constraint, Darshan sees it as a strategic lever that can accelerate your business or shut it down. And he also has some takes on medical affairs and things that MSLs can be doing as we move into the future. So, Darshan, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Keith. It's so exciting to be on the other side of the microphone. I'm usually the one asking the questions. Today I get to be cross-examined. So I'm excited to be here, and thank you for allowing me the opportunity. Plus, it's with you. So I know that you've spoken to some stalwarts in the field. So I appreciate being in that list.
Well, Darshan, I was excited. I know we've had lots of conversations in the past. Start us off and tell us a little bit about your background and how you landed where you are, and tell us a little bit about your podcast and your area of focus.
Sure, and thank you for the opportunity. So, my name is Darshan Kulkarni. I'm the principal attorney at the Kulkarni law firm. At the firm, we've focused on life sciences related issues almost exclusively since 2009. I used to be corporate counsel for a generic pharma company that also had some medical devices in there. I was then VP of regulatory strategy and policy for a consulting company that finally went public. So it was VC backed at that point. I was general counsel, chief compliance officer, probably a little bit of chief operating officer for a company that spun out of Penn from the University of Pennsylvania, which was a great opportunity as well. And then I teach at Drexel Law. I teach food and drug law. As you mentioned, I have a doctorate in pharmacy. I'm an attorney. I have a master's in quality assurance and regulatory affairs. I have a clerkship from the Eastern District of Pennsylvania. I have a fellowship from Jefferson University of Maryland, I believe. And then more importantly than all of these things, is I have an associate's in general studies. So that covers me for a whole bunch of different opportunities. So one day when I'm looking for a job, I think that associates is going to be the one that gets me. I'm excited about that. I also have my own podcast. It's called Darshan. Well, I have multiple podcasts, but the two that are relevant. One is called Darshan Talks. I've had that since probably about 2019. It's gone through many iterations. The current iteration of Darshan Talks it's intended for the lay audience on life sciences issues and how it all comes together. On the other hand, there's also the KLF Deep Dive, which really talks about a more professional audience and what are the compliance issues that come into place for them. And we're talking about everything from difference between wellness and medical devices, or we're talking about clinical research, we're talking about advertising promotion, we're talking about medical affairs, we're talking about clinical trial transparency. I'm interviewing GCs. I've had Bob Califf from the FDA on there. I've had Ajit Pai be a guest from the FCC. So it's been a fun conversation. I've done over 1,000 of those interviews as well.
Fascinating. What would you say has been the biggest lesson from doing the podcast and the varied topics that you've discussed?
For me, I think part of it is, what is the point of the podcast? It started off in 2009 as just something interesting to do. But in 2020, it was COVID, and it gave me an opportunity to talk to people, because I was stuck, like most of us were, with COVID, and I was just like, I want to talk to people. I can't not. So LinkedIn came out and said, we are going to allow you guys to do a live stream, and if you qualify, we'll sort of enable that. And I did, because I would post a fair amount. The result of that landed up being I would reach out to people, and I'd sort of connect with them, and I got to connect with all kinds of smart people, and that resulted in going from the purpose of, I just want to connect with people, to being a client lead. So it became great for that. And I was like, this is going to be amazing. It's going to be client lead. And then I started interviewing a bunch of privacy lawyers. And I went, wait a second, what they do in privacy is very, very relevant to what I do, but it's not that different from what I do. It'll end up becoming a source for teaching me about privacy elements that that most lawyers don't even think about. So it's allowed me to add new service areas. It's allowed me to connect and network with people. It's been a source of clients for me. And all of it all at the same time. And I get to talk to some incredible, fascinating people, people who are making the news, not just reporting on it. And I think that that's fascinating as well.
Yeah, that's been the most important, well, I guess fascinating part, because you talk to a lot of people. And in the short time I've been podcasting, I've met a lot of fascinating people, but I've also learned a lot more about the industry. Than it's interesting because you're always so siloed. You don't realize how much or how siloed you are until you start having some more of these types of conversations. Now, I know in the past, and we've had a lot of conversations around legal regulatory compliance things, you said that most legal advice is either legally sound but impractical, or practical but risky. What's an example of where you've had to reconcile that tension?
I think AI is a great place to talk about. Right now, everyone's talking about AI. And a really good example of it right now is where everyone wants to use AI to make their job easier. And that's totally fair, totally appropriate, except when it's done wrong. For example, right now, if I tell someone you can't use AI, that's the most conservative legal advice I can give. But let's be honest, no one's going to follow me on that. On the other hand, if I say use AI all you want, what you get is a case that literally popped up, I want to say 3 weeks ago. This was a Judge Rakoff decision, I want to say in the Third Circuit. Essentially what it was the lawyer told his client that what I want you to do is I want you to organize your thoughts, give them to me. So what the client does is he goes out there and he writes out all of his thoughts and then runs it through Claude. And Claude was one of the free Claudes that he had, which is great. He was like, oh, perfect. Here's my organized thoughts. The other side found out. And they said the moment you use Claude, it was a disclosure to other people, because theoretically, Claude is not private. So the moment it was a disclosure, you lose attorney-client privilege. Now that's bad. Losing attorney-client privilege is terrible. But here's why I think it matters in the life sciences. In the end, the only thing the life sciences cares about is your intellectual property. The moment you have a situation where your intellectual property is discoverable, or not otherwise protectable, you have a major problem on your hands. So, in that situation, if that disclosure is made, what you're dealing with is something called the on sale bar or the publication bar. Essentially, if either one of them is tripped, you have up to 1 year to file a patent. Well, if you don't even know that you tripped it, more likely than not, you're not going to file your patent in time. Similarly, as a trade secret, the moment it's disclosed, advertently or inadvertently, you now don't have a trade secret. For companies that live and die by IP, this is a major problem. I've been involved with clinical trial sites who are like, I don't care what happens. I have to be able to use it to be able to scale my company. Well, they're taking patient data, they're taking sponsor IP, and they're uploading it. And they're like, I'm going to ignore what you tell me because the truth is I have to do this. Well, what is the right answer? How do I tell them you can't do this because you will get sued? And the fact of the matter is it won't happen today, but it will happen probably 3 or 4 years when someone discovers that they can make $1 billion on the next Ozempic because the patents themselves were invalid.
Okay. So it brings in a lot of thoughts, because when we think of AI, we think of just Claude, ChatGPT, Perplexity. There's a lot of other AI tools and resources that have been out there for years, machine learning.
Yeah.
we know that clinical R&D have been using a lot of these tools for years, but in the
Mhm.
sense it's the firewall. There's kind of a firewall that sits there, but then there's also this piece where there's the day to day. So folks have been using for years have been using machine learning AI to do their job, but not in their day to day, answer email, do this, do that, do the other. And then at least what I found in a lot of organizations, there's a lack of governance. So they don't even govern how you utilize a chat GBT, or let's say you're using Gemini, for example, as a part of the 365 ecosystem. Talk a little bit about that. What companies should be thinking about when they're giving direction to people and they have these tools that everybody's using. What would be a good way to set up that governance?
I think the first thing you want to start off when you're, it's basically the same process when you're setting up a lot of governance, right? It starts off by going, what are the promises I've made? So you want to first find out, as a company, do you, for example, say, I will disclose a bunch of information? Because you might say transparency is a core value. Okay. What does transparency mean to you? On the other hand, what does confidentiality mean to you? On the other hand, what does value mean to you? All those words, of that they're in your public facing statements, which they typically are, those all need to be brought in and reconciled. Then you want to look internally to go, what are the actual use cases? How are you using this? Find out the top 5, 10, 15, 20 use cases and go, how does all this reconcile with what I'm saying externally? So internally, you're saying, I want to protect everything. Externally, you're saying you want to protect nothing. Well, one of those two things can't be right. So you've got to sort of address that tension. Once you've done those issues, then you start actually asking people. You start interviewing people, and then you build out your governance structure out of that. You don't want to create a governance structure in isolation with this theoretical, here's what I really want to achieve, because the fact is, the moment it comes out, it's out of date. So I think when you're setting up an AI governance structure, you start by actually talking to the people who are going to use it. Then you want to talk about, from a confidentiality perspective, how are you going to maintain that? Are you going to have a walled garden where you control the entire AI? In which case, how do you do that? Is it all open source, or are you going to use closed source tools that have callouts? If you have callouts, does that trigger something? What if you don't have callouts, but people are using their own machines? If they are using their own machines, that callout may result in, and maybe you don't even have a callout, but you have a um, applet that is running on your browser, for example, and that browser is not subject to the same terms and conditions that your Microsoft 365 suite is, or your Google Gemini is, but you're disclosing things in that using that tool. You got to be careful. So all of that will come into play as you start developing your structure. Now, are you going to have all of your data maybe on the server side? You might go, that's the safest way to operate. I can afford it. I'm a big company. I can do it. Except now you're going to get all those calls to your individual server, and that slows your server down. So are you willing to pay the price of slow servers? All of which needs to be reconciled, all of which needs to be brought together. And then you're talking about things like ChatGPT, you're talking about Gemini, you're talking about Sora, etc. Who owns the IP? Gemini will say, for example, if you look at their terms, Gemini is actually silent, if I remember. The last time I checked, they were silent on IP ownership. On the other hand, I think Anthropic and OpenAI, the last time I looked, said you own rights to the prompt. But they don't say anything about the actual IP that comes out. So I think Lilly is the one that said that we're going to develop products using AI. Great. Who owns that product? Because usually you need a human to invent.
So even if because I know a lot of organizations are doing this, they're building their quote unquote own AI. I don't know if that really means they own the AI. I assume that they're hiring somebody. So in a sense, it's still the same issue then. So even though it's behind the wall, because you're trying to do is protect your IP and all of those things, ultimately it comes down to you need to be able to negotiate those terms.
Also, let's say, like you said, there's a wall. You're doing all of your stuff inside the wall, but every so often, someone throws like a hook over the wall and says, give me the information, which happens all the time. Those are called calls. If that's what's happening, is it really within the wall at that point? And I'd argue it's not. So that's the other concern.
So who should own AI governance? I mean, I talk with a lot of organizations and it's not clear. Is it HR? Is it the CTO? Is it the CIO? I mean, in your mind, what makes the most sense?
Honestly, the chief compliance officer, whoever that is. In some companies, it's going to be separate from the chief legal officer. In the end, when something goes wrong, who's responsible? Who's got to defend that? And more likely than not, it's going to be compliance or legal. So in which case, they should at least know what's in there. Now, you might argue that the way to handle it is maybe they become stakeholders. Okay, fine. You're going to make them a stakeholder, and that's totally okay. But in that scenario, what happens when things go wrong? Because now a stakeholder has all the responsibility, but none of the control. And that's what you've got to sort of start balancing out.
Okay. Let's shift gears a little bit. Kind of stay on this topic of AI. I know, at least from a legal perspective, medical affairs perspective, even a sales perspective, but I know at least those two other areas are kind of your sweet spot. How do you see AI eliminating jobs? I know that that's a concern for a lot of people in these roles. Is that something that you see happening, or just what are your thoughts in general?
About AI eliminating jobs. So I think it's really interesting. I was listening to a podcast yesterday and it was talking about Facebook and was talking about VR. And it was talking about how by 2027, they said that something like 66% of all business will be conducted in the VR, in the virtual world. Yeah, I haven't seen that yet. I have a VR system right behind me, but I can't get myself to wear it. I hear people talking about how AI is changing the world. At a practical level, though, how many people are saying, I'm not going to go to my doctor because some AI said ABC? Now, it's helping you do sort of a revved up Google search. But I don't trust the AI with going, your opinion is valid, because the AI doesn't have to stand behind that opinion. In fact, what you have is a situation where lawyers who use it, so they actually know what's supposed to be in the answer, they're getting the wrong citations. And you're getting sort of disbarred, or you're getting some serious sanctions associated with it. Doctors are finding out that the AI is being used by patients who are then committing suicide. Because it is just simply, what's the word I'm looking for? Revving you up. It sort of gaslights you. There was a guy who thought he invented a multi-billion-dollar company, only to find out that the AI was gaslighting him the whole time. So the point being, I am not super worried yet about AI eliminating jobs. I'm not saying it can't happen. And I'm heavily invested in, so full disclosure, I'm heavily invested in like your FANG stocks. But the fact is that I'm not worried about this version of AI doing that. Now, this version of AI may very well solve the coding world and the coding problems we have. So I think Anthropic said that it has a tool called Mythos. And Mythos is apparently able to hack better than any human hacker outside the most elite ones out there. And that's great. But until, I feel like 3 years ago, ChatGPT told us GPT-5 will do that for us. Until I actually see it, I'm not worried yet. There's a lot of, the next version is going to be the most incredible thing in the world, but it's never this version. And this version is, the gap between this version and the next version is too deep. So that's been my experience. How about you?
Yeah, I agree. I hear this. It's almost like doomsday.
Yeah.
you listen to a lot of these podcasts. Trying to remember, I think it's Diary of a CEO. He has some interesting
Yeah,
content, and
yeah,
he has a lot of guys that have worked on AI. And so it's this whole doomsday scenario. And, and a few, I just said, all right, I'm not going to listen anymore. And I tell that story because in the backdrop, I was trying to do some stuff around BD. And so I was trying to automate the process using Claude, using ChatGPT
yeah,
and all of
yeah.
these things. And so I kept getting this answer that kept telling me, well, you can't, because I was looking into agents. How can I have agents do some of this stuff for me? And it kept coming back with, well, it can't do that. And I wouldn't accept that answer. So I had to do deep research. And ultimately, what it came back to was this trust, this judgment, and this decision making that you can outsource part of this. And yes, AI can help you do that, but ultimately, it can't do all of that. And so I look and I say, all right, we're already through the first quarter of 2026.
Yeah.
Some of these things are supposed to happen in 2027. We still have people that don't even use AI on a regular basis in their role. So part of me says, yes, I do think it will get rid of some jobs, but what I see is that it gets rid of jobs, or some companies get rid of jobs and then realize they need to hire those people back because
We're seeing
AI
that.
can't do all of those things. I think the other part of it is, which is the more important piece, is that you begin to learn how to use it in a way that it can be practical and it can scale what you do. I think if you're not utilizing it on a regular basis, then you're going to be left behind. It's almost like putting Word on, I know how to use Word, on your resume. Doesn't everybody?
Yeah, yeah.
I think AI is going to be the same way.
I think what AI is going to give all of us is the ability to scale faster, but you still need a human being. And I hear things like, oh, um, Mark Zuckerberg's like, I'm trying to train an AI to replace me. Okay, Mark, when you do, let me know how that goes. But for now, I'm not worried. I think like your AI using agents can scale, but the fact is that there's a certain amount of humanity, which we all seem to like, that is missing from the outputs as it exists right now. And what I found myself doing this, and you tell me if you can. The easiest use of AI is to write things like blogs. But the truth is, every time I can tell with a good, I'd say 70 to 80% certainty that something's written by an AI, because the structure of that write up just feels very, very AI driven. In that scenario, I find it fascinating that I just never want to read the article because I go, it's not your thought. It's not where you come from. And the AI sort of distilled what you did. But when it distilled it, it's so concentrated that it doesn't feel human anymore. Those wasteful sentences that we naturally as human beings have that paces a conversation, those are missing. And until you can find a way to make AI feel more human and not as transactional, I think we're pretty far away.
Yeah, I think to get it to write for you, it takes a lot of work. So even if because the way AI
Refine
works
it.
with the replication and you put in writing samples and all of those, I
Yeah.
love the additional adverbs, always
Yeah.
a bunch of adverbs in it.
Yeah.
And it's, it's a great tool, but you have to go in and you have to edit a lot. You have to go in and make it really sound like you want it to sound. And even still, sometimes the essence of what you're trying to get to, you can't get to.
Yep.
Where it works well is if you have a bunch of disparate thoughts, you
Mm-hmm.
drop all of those in, it'll help tie them together in a way that
Correct.
makes sense.
Correct.
But here again, you still have to go back. You have to do a lot of heavy edits, read through to make sure that it makes sense.
So if it's not a duplicable task, if it's not something you do on a routine basis, you're not going to make that effort. So where does AI fit in those worlds? And I always go, people want to automate the obvious, but by definition, the way AI works is it works off of probabilities, which means it's always going to revert to the mean. And if it's going to revert to the mean, you're not going to have the strokes of genius that a typical writer would have. You're not going to see those sillinesses, like the mistakes that a typical writer would have. And I find that that is missing in AI, whether it's trained or untrained. But that's just been my experience. And what do I know?
Yeah, I think the whole thing about garbage in, garbage out
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
applies. If you're somebody that doesn't read a lot, don't stay abreast of things, and you use it as a tool, you're going to get what you get. If you're somebody
Mhm.
that reads a lot, it can help amplify that. But here again, you still have to have some skill set.
Correct. 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 So I'm agreeing with you on all of that. I think when you start talking about applying it to the medical affairs world, you have to worry about things like intended use. You have to worry about things like off-label marketing. And and if you're marketing and your tool is being used, the fact is that multiple courts have come out and said that if the AI says something that you should have caught, we're still going to hold you responsible for it. So if your medical affairs team has AI that's constantly promoting a product of yours, well, that's problematic. If it's giving out problematic information that lands up hurting a patient, well, they're going to hold you responsible for it. Um, each of those has to be considered, and there are a lot of tool makers who simply go, "You simply don't understand. You don't understand that you're on the precipice of change." And I go, "I've stood on the precipice of change for the last 20 years. It's just different change each time. The precipice stays the same. I've never actually had to cross that precipice yet." But I find AI to be an exciting technology without a doubt. But I don't think the current iteration is the one that dethrones humans. But that's just my take.
Yeah, it is interesting to hear when you listen to people that quote unquote experts versus people's actually experience.
Yeah.
It's very different.
I find the experts have something to gain if the AI does what it's supposed to. Like if their dreams work out. So I find it hard to take experts seriously. Um, I also I was reading this article. I have a friend of mine in a big pharma company, and he wants to use AI for a lot of major skill sets, and I think that's wonderful. The problem is that I sent him a LinkedIn post from earlier today. It was a legal uh, tool that uses AI, and the company, I think it was a law firm, they basically had sent in determination, and they said what we discovered was that we were supposed to use this for X number of people. Only 3 people used it, but those 3 people would have used anything, any toy you give to them. So we didn't convince any new people to actually play with this new toy.
Hmm.
Because the 3 people would have done anything to continue to use it because this new toy was so glitchy and wasn't anywhere close to being perfect. So it really ended up being an incremental add-on of energy that did not actually change the efforts they had to make. And so people just said it's not worth it. Now, I don't think it's as simple as that. For me, for example, I've had to sometimes do what are called 50 state reviews. So all 50 states, if you want to know what states are, say, sales reps who need to be licensed, there are some states that do that, some states that don't. I personally could sit down and spend the next, I don't know, 40 hours going through every individual state, finding a place, looking at whether they have a requirement, and then wondering if I've caught something, missed something, blah, blah, blah. Or I can send the AI to do that. Now, I've done that. And not that specific search, for other searches, what I often find is that the citations are wrong, but it gets me within the same zip code. So once I'm in the zip code, I can find the specific location faster, but it's not getting me the location. I don't remember the last time it got me 100% answer. I don't think it ever has, which means that I have to check 100% just to
Hmm.
make sure that I didn't get it wrong.
Right. Okay.
So,
Yeah, that makes sense. So if you look out on the legal regulatory front, and if you were sending a message to commercial leaders, what would be 2 or 3 things that should be watch outs for them with their teams?
I think the first thing is you need to be thinking about AI because you will, and if you tell them not to, I think you're missing out. I think that direct to patient is the next area that a lot of people are focusing on. So how do a lot of companies are saying, can I bypass payers like PBMs and directly have patients pay? And that's happening. I've seen that happen not just with drugs, which makes sense, not just with small molecules, not just with proteins, but with products that often need infusions. And they're saying that, you know what, we can cut our costs significantly if we get rid of the middlemen along the way. And that's a game changer for a lot of companies. So I think I think they also need to know that there's a big uptick in privacy. So if you're sending data to be managed either in Europe, in China, in, as the president calls it, a bunch of shithole countries, you are risking things under the Biosecure Act. They're risking things under the bulk data rule. Keep track of that. So, for example, if you have a pharmacovigilance deal that involves, say, China, for argument's sake, because there are a lot of deals with China, be careful of what that means. Then you've got another situation that you want to start thinking about, which is overall compliance. The Department of Justice yesterday, I want to say, released a corporate compliance program. And it said that we want to know more about self-disclosure, and we want you to disclose. And how are we going to treat people and companies that's appropriately self-disclose? We're going to hold people individually responsible. So we may not be able to shut down, may not want to shut down a company that provides life-saving drugs, but we can take down a person, and we're not going to give you full credit for collaborating if you don't disclose the people we can name, shame, and blame. So those are the types of issues that I think are top of mind. The second, I'm also dealing with some fascinating things like 3D printing, and I'm dealing with things like AI influencers, and I'm dealing with things like compounding pharmacies, med spas, and more. But gives you a flavor of the kinds of areas I get pulled into.
Yeah, that's a lot of different stuff.
Yeah, I love it. I'm very lucky to have that.
Yeah, you have a varied experience, which is good.
I can't complain. I'm very lucky to have that. Thank you.
Now, do you have a favorite area?
I think it changes, right? I think if you have a curious enough mind, the fact is, in the end, you've explored a lot of things that are happening. So in each case, I don't think med spas were on my list 4 years ago. They form a core area for what I get pulled into. Compounding pharmacies were not that hot 4 years ago. They're massive right now. You can talk about promotional compliance. Compliance itself was not that huge, and now you've got the Justice Department and the U.S. Attorney Generals and the state attorney generals all working together, and they've made compliance a major issue. And the Trump administration is kind of down for prosecuting because it gives you a lot of the money that he's looking for to fund a lot of his plans. So I think going forward, it's going to be a fascinating trend. 2026 is already looking very interesting. So I think those are the things that keep me excited and constantly moving, because every time you're ready to zig, you have to zag because something else is happening.
What would you say would be pharma companies' biggest risks 2026 going into 2027?
I mean, I can tell you compliance and I can tell you all those things, but the fact is that compounding pharmacies are going to be their biggest risk, because the fact is a lot of them are going, if I can make the drug for cheap, I'm going to. So unless you're going to pick a fight with 300,000 compounding pharmacists, that's a hard thing to do, especially when they're also, in many cases, the people who stock your drugs.
Okay.
So I think there is a risk that you have to manage. So having priorities and sort of not going after, for example, the physicians who might be doing the same thing, of which is going to come to bear for you as you continue. So I don't know, is that responsive?
Yeah, I think so. I know that companies are always worried about, promotional
Yeah.
how well you promote,
Yep.
with more tools, resources. We've talked a lot about AI. I would imagine that AI probably increases that risk because you're using AI tools in the background. And given some of the things that you said earlier about if AI says it, they're going to hold you responsible.
Correct. Correct.
So there's that unintended consequence.
Yeah. I think until AI can itself be held responsible, which I don't know if they ever will. They probably will at some point, but I don't think we're close to that yet.
Yeah,
Um,
probably not.
and I don't know if you can't hold the AI responsible, then do you hold the company responsible? If you're going to hold the company responsible, um, every time a doctor writes a bad prescription, i.e., your AI writes a bad prescription, that could bankrupt a company very, very quickly, or bankrupt the insurance company very, very quickly, which is very interesting to me.
Yeah. I would how do you see training, I guess, around compliance regulatory issues?
I think training has to evolve. I think I was thinking about this yesterday. I think people think of AI as something you have to train on, not train with. And I think that's fascinating. For example, I'm actively thinking about. So I teach at Drexel Law, and one of the tools I'm thinking about using is um, instead of throwing a bunch of information at the person saying, "Okay, answer these questions," like most CLE or the like do, have them interact with an AI and let's see what their answers are. When neither you nor they know what the questions are going to be, do they know how to negotiate with an AI? Because that's going to be the future. And in the context um, of a prompt, how do you convince um, the AI to do whatever you think it's going to do? And that interaction the way that transaction happens is going to be a really good way to see if they actually learned something from what you just trained them on.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense because it's almost like having a thinking partner. You go back and
Exactly right.
forth.
Exactly right. Exactly right. And I haven't seen anyone do that. I've tried to do that, but the creating the right prompt is very complicated. So I need to keep working on it. I haven't found a good answer yet.
I'm sure you will.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
We've talked about a lot of different information content. What question should I ask you that I haven't asked you?
Um, how about where you can find me if you have questions?
Okay, where can we find you? You have
Uh,
questions.
well, you can always find me on LinkedIn at Darshan Kulkarni. That's Kulkarni. You can also go to my website, kulkarnilawfirm.com, or you can always reach out to Keith, who can always connect you to me, because Keith is the person to talk to. And if you want to know someone awesome and you want to know someone who knows everyone, you want to talk to Keith because he's been great with that.
Well, Darshan, thank you so much for being on Inside Pharma Leadership. It's
Thank you
been
for
a
allowing me
pleasure.
to be part of this.
All right. Well, thank you.